Welcome to this episode of the Iowa Beef Collective TV. I'm your host, Patrick Wall, and I am here today with my new boss. She's been on the job for about 5 hours now. Yeah. So it's July 1 when we're taping this, and the new Beef Center director, Aimee, how do you want us to call you? Aimee Wertz-Lutz?
Just Aimee Lutz is
Aimee
fine.
Lutz, okay. So she's going to be taking over for most of us that knew the Dan Loy position for quite some time, but she's leading the Iowa Beef Center group, the extension and outreach group that covers traditionally just beef cattle. So it's day one. Introduce yourself to our audience and just kind of tell us what led you to this part of your career as director of the Beef Center.
So good morning. My name is Aimee Lutz. I grew up on a grain and livestock farm in the central part of Illinois. When I was involved in 4-H and FFA and a variety of things when I was younger, and then went to college, not really certain on what I wanted to pursue, thought about physical therapy, thought about a lot of different things. But as I kind of progressed through that, my first freshman year, I really realized that agriculture had been such a big part of my life, and that's where I decided to focus. So I changed colleges, changed degree paths, and went into an animal science field at Illinois State University. And then from there, I got the opportunity to work in a research lab. Really enjoyed doing that a lot. And my undergrad advisor encouraged me to go to grad school, and I did so at University of Illinois and pursued my master's and PhD there. And then when I finished that up, I was job searching, wanting to stay in the Midwest. Wasn't certain if I wanted to do industry or academia. I took a postdoc with Don Bites and Alan Trinkle here at Iowa State, and it was a great opportunity. I got a lot of grant writing skills. Made a lot of great connections, and then pursued a teaching career and research career at South Dakota State University in their Animal and Range Science department. And I taught and did research there for about 8 years. And then as that progressed, I kind of still had that desire to work in industry a little bit more. And so I took made another career change and went to work for ADM Animal Nutrition. And I worked as a research scientist for them for about 8 years. And then most recently, I've had a role with Devonish Nutrition doing technical support in the ruminant area. And Devonish is a small feed company in Minnesota. So from there, I got an opportunity again. Iowa State is a very good place to be. I've enjoyed my time that I was here, and the extension position was very interesting to me. I had enjoyed my technical support role, and so when that opportunity came up, I interviewed for the position and was fortunate enough to be hired.
For me personally, I am jacked to have someone from industry come back into extension and education. I don't know if you know, that's rare. To get someone from industry back on our side is something we really look forward to. Because if we're honest with ourselves in extension, we struggle to understand everything that the industry does, what's current, what they're working on, what they want to know, and how we can help them. So I guess briefly talk about, with your time with ADM and Devonish, where was your focus? What did you do?
Mm-hmm. So when I was with ADM, I had a research focus, and I worked at their research facility that was located in Quincy, Illinois. I did a lot with protein nutrition in cattle. I did some mineral supplementation work, looking at requirements and looking at impacts on fetal nutrition and where could we provide supplements that actually impacted some kind of economically important trait for the cow or for her calf, realizing that a lot of producers want to invest in technology, but they have to have a financial return on the other end. And so we really focused on that. When I switched to doing more of the technical support role, kind of in that same vein, what were the factors that we could influence from a nutritional standpoint that impacted the bottom line for the producer? And that became that marrying of science and business together is just something that I ended up really enjoying tremendously. And so, that's kind of what I worked on. So kind of different areas, but they kind of overlapped quite a bit.
Let's just sort of back up and try to get to know the Aimee. So family life, where have you been? Where have you lived? What places have you been that led you to Iowa?
Okay. So I grew up in Illinois. When I finished finished my education, but finished my formal education in Illinois. I came here to Iowa State. And I met my husband here at that point in time about 25 years ago. He wasn't my husband at the
Life
time.
comes at you fast.
Yeah, it does. Kind of full circle. And I went to South Dakota State from here in a teaching and research role. So I lived in Brookings, South Dakota. And then we moved to Quincy, Illinois, which is right on the Mississippi River. Nice and hot and humid, kind of like today in Iowa. We lived there for about 8 years, and then most recently have lived in Fairmont, Minnesota, which is about an hour west of Albert Lea. So not too far from the Iowa border.
And the reason I asked that question is because I know the answer. You've never left the Midwest.
I haven't. And my daughter and I were just talking about this yesterday.
Yep.
I'm like, she said something about she was a Midwestern girl. And I said, yeah, I'm a Midwestern girl too. I said, that was always one of my big focuses is wherever my career led me, and I've had multiple changes in my career, I always wanted to stay in the Midwest. I'm very familiar with the area. I like that I've had a lot of diversity in where I've lived in the Midwest. I've learned a lot of things at each of the places I've been, because while they're all the Midwest, they are all different some as well. So
we're happy you stayed. How about that?
Thank you. We're happy to be back, actually.
Good,
it's been a very fun homecoming, if you will, kind of.
So you're obviously this is day one, so you're drinking through a fire hose. I know the drill, right? What do you sort of envision the first 5 years as the Beef Center director? What do you think it's going to look like? And this isn't a test, but we will see how right you are.
You're going to hold me accountable, aren't you? This is on video.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, one, I think there's really that multi-generational balance. You have people that are very interested in being involved in the beef industry that are students, and they're still developing their thought processes and their training, but they will be our future leaders. Then you have other stakeholders that are producers right now who are very highly educated, but that education is like mine, 25 years old. So you always have to learn something new. And how do we bring new information to somebody that has a lot of experience and somebody who has very little experience to get that to be kind of continuous from start to finish? So I think that multi-generational aspect is very important from my perspective. I know I'll have a small teaching role, so I think that's very important. And then obviously lots of extension activities as well. Really, one of the things I think that maybe I felt was a gap in my education when I did go into industry is really having that link of it has to impact the bottom line. So science is great, and I love science. How do we get to that point that we're doing scientific research that has a positive impact on beef production? Because we have to be financially sound if we're going to be able to survive. And it's tough.
And I think, part of the reason for this format, we've went to the podcast TV format out of necessity. The death by PowerPoint, as we say, that model doesn't really work as good as it did 10, 15 years ago. If you would have told me when I started that I'd be doing, podcast TV episodes in order to educate folks, I'd have told you they're crazy. But, just a quick story. A friend of mine sent me a Snapchat of him in his tractor, and he was watching a sprint car race, listening to a Cyclone podcast while his tractor was planting corn. And that's how he is getting educated and getting entertainment and doing his job all at the same time. So I think we have to enter that space somehow, and this is kind of the format that'll hopefully get us into that. From a research extension focus, where would you like to see us go? What are the hot topics? Now, I'm asking you to draw from your industry perspective. What do we need to be working on?
Wow. So lots of different things. And obviously my training is nutrition, so I'd probably gravitate to nutritional topics. I think there's a lot we don't know about vitamin and mineral nutrition and how it impacts our reproducing cows and our growing animals as well. I think if you look at like NRC requirements, they've been static 10 parts per million copper for every single animal for my entire life,
right,
and well before that. So is that true? If you look at some of our other species, they break those out based on growth potential, based on stage of production. Do we need to dig into that kind of stuff? So that's a possibility for something. Where are they having impacts? Things like manganese. Manganese is supposedly very abundant or adequately abundant in forages, how available is it? And if it's not, what kinds of problems do you have? Where do you have interaction? So those would be some initial things that would focus probably on vitamin and mineral nutrition. Feedlot perspective, kind of same things. What are the things that are giving us significant problems in the feedlot? And are there ways to solve that with either a nutritional intervention, a management intervention? Starch digestibility is another factor. Are there things we can do to aid the rumen microbes in helping them ferment and utilize starch better? Are there challenges with that cause foot problems? Where do we go with that? What are the things that are giving us significant problems? And, feed efficiency is a huge, huge thing. And I know we hear about it all the time, but it's hard to control. It's hard to manipulate, but it has real significant impacts on bottom line. So where are the pinch points or factors that we can control, manipulate that can help improve those aspects? Meat quality would be another one.
Right.
Yeah.
I think you're in a good spot because, Steph Hansen's group's probably done as much mineral research as anyone. And, we're not feeding the same beast that we were even 10 years ago. We're taking them bigger. They're older. We have foot issues. Is age a factor of the foot issue? There's a lot of things we don't know because we've never fed a 1,700-pound steer and figured out how to do it well.
In July heat.
In July.
The changing environment as well can be factors that all of those other things that lay on top of cattle production and, like you said, taking them to much heavier weights, longer feeding periods, those types of things.
And then, the heifer mates, how big are we making them? Can we make them smaller? If we do, and they're a more efficient cow, what are the drawbacks? And I think, it's kind of a revolving door. We try to solve one problem when we create 2-3 more. But that's kind of why we're here, right? To tell us how to walk through that. We'll pivot a bit and talk about the extension group that's here. So there's 6 of us across the state. One's an economist. One has sort of some background in 4-H and organizational stuff. We have a nutritionist, a couple of them actually. And then I'm more of a genetics-focused type person. So how do you envision working with all of us, knowing what you know about the state? Because my region is completely different from Northwest Iowa, where there's more feedlot cattle. Where do you think your focus will be with the team? And how do you kind of direct us all, knowing that we're not all the same?
So I think that's one of the things that excited me most about taking this position is I wouldn't want you guys all to be the same, because I think that a lot of the strength lies in the fact that there's diversity among you in terms of how you tackle problems, what problems you're dealing with. And even though there might not be a huge presence of a particular problem in, say, Northwest Iowa, all of a sudden, if that problem pops up, you might be our go-to person to come talk. And I think that becomes the value of having 6 people spread across the state is in your area, you're going to deal with very specific problems, but those may apply across the state and elsewhere. So I really think that's our strength. One of the things I know I did talk about in my interview was how do you capitalize? And one of the things I really learned when I worked for ADM is they really focused on how do you capitalize on people's strengths and minimize their weaknesses. Every one of us has weaknesses. Every one of us has strengths. Capitalize on our strengths, minimize our weaknesses, because we will move forward stronger in doing that. So that would be my goal. I'm day 1, 5 hours in, so I'm still learning about what people's strengths and weaknesses are. But that would be my goal.
Good. And I think, most of us have been here, I think the least 10 years, 7 or 8 years. So we're not as green as we once were. And I failed to mention Chris. We have a vet who's on staff as well. So we've got a good group going forward. We're gonna touch on the 800-pound gorilla, and that is funding. How do you foresee? And one of my true hopes with getting someone from industry is, where do you see us maybe pivoting, or maybe just, trying to go at it from a different angle? How do we secure funding to do the research portion of our job?
So I think that's a very valuable thing. And you said something in the very beginning of this interview when you were talking about bringing somebody in from industry, and knowing what they want and what they need. And sometimes what they want and what need is very, I wouldn't say it's different, but that has to have a different focus than than something that we may think of from a truly academic standpoint. We're all excited to learn about it, find out about it. They need a problem solved.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have to start looking, I think, at solutions. And I think there are companies out there that have potential products that could bring solutions. Research is expensive, as you guys well know. So finding ways that we can have a research facility that's available for those kinds of companies that maybe aren't big enough or don't want to invest in a research facility that they can't keep functioning all the time, but they can support a project or multiple projects over different years. So just trying to figure out a way to figure out what it is they need and how, and we may have to be a little flexible in giving up some of our grasp on intellectual property. There's a variety of things, and I'm again 5 hours into this, so I don't know all the ins and outs of the challenges we're going to face. But I can tell you from my experience most recently, there are companies out there that would like to have opportunities to do research. It would probably focus more on product testing, but that hits on that solution, looking for solutions versus just defining the problem better. And so I think they're out there. It's a matter of how are we going to capitalize it. And I think really just building connections and starting those conversations with different stakeholder groups, more from a commercial industry side of what they need and want from a research perspective, is probably where I'd start with that.
We'll touch briefly. You do have a small teaching appointment, so for maybe the prospective students that are watching, or those maybe parents sending their kids off to college, what's your teaching responsibility here?
So that hasn't been formally defined yet.
Great.
But here's the thing that we've been kind of talking about. I've spent a lot of time in feed formulation, both from a research perspective and then more recently working with a commercial feed mill. I knew a lot about nutrition when I left my graduate program. I could tell you ins and outs on fermentation, energetics, all kinds of stuff. There's some real world things that I get asked to do as a nutritionist that I would say borderline on even being nutrition, but they expect their nutritionist to know it. So I'll give you an example. I would routinely have people come to me and say, I have this VFD. Can you make this fit into my half-pound balancer that I buy from you? And so then I would have to go into the formulation piece, not really nutrition. I mean, we're talking about feeding a medication and get it worked back in so that it delivered the right drug amount within a set time frame. Walk through all the regulatory pieces that have to come with that. And being in a commercial feed mill, to have a medicated feed mill license, there's a lot of labeling and regulatory stuff. So some of those kinds of things. Other things I have dealt with that I think could be really good learning opportunities for our students would be a lot of times if there's a challenge, my cow ate your mineral, this happened, it's your fault. The mineral is only 1% of the total animal's diet. Okay. But walking through that, did they eat it? How much did they eat? Are there biological assays like liver biopsies that would say they were actually eating the mineral that caused the problem? Did it get to a point of toxicity? So walking through all those different pieces to figure out what happened and then how we can come up with the solutions. So what we've been talking about is a more advanced feed formulation class that would kind of walk through some of these scenarios that hit our students. And it's not, here's my 4 forage analyses. Can you do my whole series of diets? That's a very important part of formulation, but some of these other pieces as well. When I think about what I do as a ruminant nutritionist for a feed company, it's quite different than some of the training I have. Now, I use all that training, but it's a matter of how do I put those pieces together. So that's what we've kind of been batting around. I don't know if that will come to fruition or not, but but it would be kind of a cool class to teach.
So essentially applied nutrition, but from a different angle than what we've
like
probably
an advanced,
used to.
Yeah, I just quite a few different scenarios. Those were 2 examples, but I have some other ones that would be pretty good
Okay.
to come up with.
So you've been in industry a while, and you're coming into education. This won't be a question that you're probably prepared to answer, but what do you think you're going to miss?
So one of the things I always enjoyed most, and I didn't realize how much I was going to enjoy this, was when I didn't realize how much business interaction happened until I went to work for ADM. And at that point, then there was all the interaction between ADM and the other vendors and companies so it really broadened my network beyond just a regional location, a state or something like that, to when you work with one of those large companies, it's all across the United States and
Hmm.
some international. I really enjoyed that. I always learned things from the different groups that I worked with. So I would say will miss that. I hope that I don't have to miss that. I just don't know enough about being here yet of how broad my network's going to get. And I think it could get just as broad as it did there, but
Yep.
yeah.
And from a personal standpoint, my wife was a little upset that we hired you because she used to work with you on the nutrition side
Yeah.
and really enjoyed it. So
I enjoyed
um,
working with her too.
that part of it, and, from my standpoint, is awesome. We really need somebody within the beef center that has an industry connection that knows people. We are connected across Iowa, but this industry is way bigger than Iowa.
And I think Iowa State, for instance, I was in Minnesota and Iowa at different times. I can't tell you the number of times that I drew on the Iowa State resources that are out there for different questions I was being asked by my customers because I live 12 miles north of the Iowa border.
Right.
What you guys are doing is just as applicable there as it was here. So I think we do reach well beyond the borders of Iowa. I think we are also a crossroads because we are so dead central, north to south and east to west. There is a tremendous amount of industry beyond cattle producers that live in this state or cross the state every single week. And so, how do we tap into that and take advantage of the resources of people that are already here? And sometimes we don't even know they're here.
Right. Final question, and you won't know the answer to this either, and it's not a quiz. But, let's say 5, 10, 15 years from now, you know enough about the Beef Center to know what we have done and what our history is. What do you see it looking like in 10, 15 years, and how much different do you want it to be, or maybe it's the same only from a different angle? What do you think the role of the Beef Center will be in a decade or 15 years? You pick the timeline.
I don't even want to think about how old I'm going to be at that point in time. But, one of the things is I think you have to hold on to the core things that are important to cattle producers because it's the same whether it was 1950 or now. It's different but the same. What I mean by it's the same is they're still concerned about nutrition. They're still concerned about animal health, still concerned about genetics, still concerned about meat quality. So I think all those fundamental things are going to stay the same. How we reach producers, I think you're very right, is going to change, whether that's podcasts. I'm sure some of the in-person stuff will still remain, but how do we capture what they need and what do I think it looks like? Again, I think you're going to have those fundamentals. I think that you're going to approach it slightly different in how you get information transferred, and we should, because otherwise we're just repeating the same things over and over again. And while some of those things are the same, those genetics of animals have changed dramatically especially from 1950 to
Right.
now, but even more recently in the last 10 years. And so I think one of the things that's going to really drive what we do is where are cattle genetics going to go? Like we've been feeding these animals to a lot heavier, and that's bringing on some challenges. We've also seen the introduction of the beef on dairy crosses, which brings some value to different segments. We have a lot of changes in genetics that might now overshadow how we use or how we evaluate starch digestion or the impact that it has, because it may be very different in that 1,700-pound animal and that beef on dairy cross that's 1,700. And how we approach feeding those in the industry is just quite different. And so I think we're going to have to kind of watch what happens probably in the next 5 years. Will we stay at these heavy weights on cattle? Will we back off them? If we're going to stay up there, how is that going to impact what we do from a feeding implant? Implants would be another one. There's some stuff that's changed with implanting strategies in some of these longer fed cattle. How is that going to impact us? When should we be implanting to get the full impact of that? And then who knows what's going to happen from a political standpoint that might also influence, will some of these technologies still exist? Will they go away? Those types of things. So.
And I think one of the things that's really hard to get our head around, and we're going to have to address it somehow, and that's the age of the producer that we have. They're, what was the stat, 59 and a half is the average Iowa producer. So the draft of producers, if you will, that would come to an extension meeting and listen to a PowerPoint, they're aging. The younger generation that's either taking over or, maybe I'll call it limping into the industry slowly because they have an off-farm job or what have you. We're going to have to figure out how to answer their questions, and they're not going to come to a meeting to ask. So I think, some of what we're doing here to tell them, concepts and who is in the industry that you can learn from, who is in the industry that can answer your question. And if that's an extension person, they need to know who we are somehow. I'm looking forward to it. It's a new platform. It's certainly a lot easier to sit here and talk to someone than it is to put together a set of PowerPoint slides. But we can still talk about the same topics, just from a different avenue. From my standpoint, welcome to the Iowa Beef Center. We're happy to have you. We'll certainly, see how you did on your test in about a year when we come back and do this again. But no, and we'll roll with the punches. That's kind of what we do in Extension. We respond to a lot of current issues and things of that nature. So again, welcome to the Beef Center. We're happy to have you on the team. Those of you joining us online, appreciate your attendance. Tune in next time. We'll have continuous episodes of the Iowa Beef Collective.
This institution is an equal opportunity provider. For the full non-discrimination statement or accommodation inquiries, go to www.extension.iastate.edu/legal.